Pastor Doug, do you believe that Project 2025 will bring in Sunday's law?
You maybe have heard the expression a nothing burger.
In this video, Doug Bachelor has a few things to say about the Pope. I will say, number one, Doug is the man. I love me some Doug Bachelor. What he did in this video, he shows what we have been speaking about in this channel. He went back and showed you how the Protestant world has changed their behavior toward Roman Catholicism because of what the Pope has done. Through his ecumenical dialogues, he literally has managed to win the hearts of many of the Protestant churches. Pretty much the Reformation is over, like they've said.
Brothers and sisters, Luther's protest is over. Is yours.
And I'm sorry to say, most of the church don't know it's over. But they better find out.
At the end of this video, I want to play another segment where he says that the Project 2025 is a nothing burger. So I would like to hear your thought on that as well. Anyway, let's begin with the first part, and then we're going to pause and come back and talk about the Project 2025 remark that he makes, okay? Let's take a listen.
Most traditional Protestants believe that this first beast in Revelation 13 is the Catholic Church. It's the same power that you find in Revelation chapter 17. A woman sits among seven hills of Rome, got the golden cup in her hand, and jewels and pearl, scarlet and purple, the color of the bishops and the priests and or the cardinals, I should say. And the fact that this first beast represents the Catholic Church, and they had a deadly wound. They started in power when they were given an army in 538 AD. That lasted almost uninterrupted for 1,260 years. And then the beast was wounded. Now it's interesting, if you look at like what Martin Luther says, he says that he had no question but that, and Luther was a priest, Catholic priest, he believed that the office of the Pope, Pope Francis may have been a very kind man, by all outward appearances he was, but the office that they're held, where they put themselves in the place of God, the Protestant reformers, you can look at Luther's, from his works here, it says, the vicar is in the place of an absent chief. What is such a vicar but Antichrist? I know, am certain that the papacy is the kingdom of Babylon, spoken of in Revelation 13. And then Jan Hus, who was martyred because of his faith, again a priest, who identified the office of the papacy and the Pope as Antichrist. The Pope is the true Antichrist, of whom it is written that he sits in the temple of God among the people where Christ is worshipped. And I think you've got that there. If it's 2 Thessalonians,
yes.
Chapter 2.
We find that actually in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3 and 4, where it says, let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come, unless there is a falling away first, and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God.
Now, friends that are watching right now, please listen carefully. A lot of dear Protestant believers, evangelicals, think this verse means that the Jewish temple must be rebuilt. When it says he sits in the temple of God, it's talking about he sits over the spiritual temple of God. The Bible says, you, the church, are the temple of the Holy Spirit. We are living stones. Christ is the cornerstone. It's using that language that Paul used. So it's saying that this power would sit over. See, he's sitting in the middle, and you look at St. Peter's. And not only Jan Hus, but look at what Calvin says. Most Baptists and Calvinistic believers believe in Calvin. Calvin says, Daniel and Paul had predicted that Antichrist would sit in the temple of God. We affirm him to be the Pope. Some persons think us too severe and censorious when we call the Roman pontiff Antichrist. That means the position. It's not saying the person's a monster. It means that office of saying, I am the vicar between God and man, because that's Christ's position. That's the Holy Spirit's position as the intercessor. And then you can look at what Roger Williams, First Baptist pastor in North America, and we'll talk about him later too. He said, he spoke as the Pope, as the pretended vicar of Christ on earth, who sits as God over the temple of God, exalting himself not only above all that is called God, but over the souls and the consciences of all his vassals, yea, over the Spirit. Now don't change slides yet. Go back to that slide. I want everyone to see Pope Francis now is sitting on his high throne between two angels. These are like the angels on the ark. And the Shekinah glory of God was between these two angels. In Isaiah 6, God is enthroned between these two seraphim. This is a man sitting in the temple of God showing himself that he is God. He may just be going through traditions as far as he's concerned. But the symbolism here and what the church officially teaches can't be missed. And Williams goes on, over the Holy Spirit, yea, over God himself, speaking against the things, God of heaven, thinking to change times and laws. Well, Sabbath is one example of that. They say they changed it from the first day to the seventh day. But he is the son of perdition. Now that ended in the church had almost uninterrupted sway until 1798, when Napoleon's general, murder of a Frenchman in Rome, gave them the excuse to enter the holy city. He arrested the Pope. He was carried off, died in exile. And you can read here, and this is Encyclopedia Americana 1941 edition, he, Berthier, made his entrance into Rome, abolished the papal government. They received a deadly wound and established a secular one. And it looked like they had lost their international influence. But beginning with Mussolini, is it 1928?
1929.
29. They had the pact where the Vatican again became an independent state. Mm-hmm. The Vatican is a country, technically. The Pope is the king or the sovereign there. And U.S. and other countries send ambassadors to the Vatican because the Pope is the supreme ruler over 1.4 billion people on the planet, Catholics. Lovely people. I expect to see many of them in heaven, but the system has departed from the original plan. Now it says this deadly wound would be healed. I want our friends to notice. Vatican News, March 13, 2013. In the first interview, Pope Francis outlined his vision for the church, saying, the thing the church needs most today is the ability to heal the wounds and to warm the hearts of the faithful. It needs nearness, proximity. I see the church as a field hospital after battle. It's useless to look seriously at an injured person, if he is talking about high cholesterol or the level of his blood sugars. You have to heal the wounds. Then you can talk about everything else. Heal the wounds, heal the wounds. And you have to start from the ground up. His whole ministry, and matter of fact, one of the last public letters the Pope wrote a month ago, he used the same language. It says, many steps have been taken in these decades to heal the wounds of centuries and millennia. And actually the message was, Jesus reveals the heart of God. He heals our wounds so we can love each other as brothers. He wrote in one of his final messages, and that was just March, a little less than a month ago. So his ministry, and the reason we're focusing on this is Francis accomplished a tremendous amount in trying to bring the Christian church back. All Christians used to be under the papacy, with the exception of Hussites and Waldenses and a few others. And then you had the Protestant Reformation. There's a great wound through the sword, the word. And they're trying to reunite. And he made incredible, Herculean efforts to do that. Here's a picture of Pope Francis with the Archbishop of Canterbury. During the time of Henry VIII, they split off. And then here you have they celebrated in 2016 the end of the Reformation by reuniting on the 500th anniversary, reuniting with the Lutherans. Lutheran leaders ask forgiveness of Rome. And if you read all that report, Martin Luther would probably be spinning in his grave if he could read what happened then. The Pope showed a lot more openness to women's involvement in clergy, though he never did go along with ordaining women priests. He put more women in charge of church management and made a lot of changes there. Francis met with Bartholomew, who is the leader of the Orthodox Church, and calling for Francis and Bartholomew issued resounding historic calls for church reunification, healing the wound. This is the language he used. Pope Francis and the Greek Orthodox Archbishop, December 16, 2022, seeking to reconcile. Here's one more historic meeting. First time, the Patriarch Kirill, the Russian Orthodox, and he's met with the Coptic church leaders. And here, and Pastor Ross, you sent me some pictures I failed to drop into the presentation, but here you have him on all the religions of the world basically coming together, including Islam.
That's right. He kind of focused on some major religions. Of course, Protestantism, represented by the Lutheran Church, and you touched on that. Then you've got the Eastern Orthodox churches. He's reaching out to them. But he's also been reaching out to Muslim countries. He did tours in Muslim countries. He signed a pact, an agreement with Muslim countries that they're not going to use religion as an excuse for war or violence. Very interesting. He's also reaching out to the Eastern religions like Buddhism,
Hinduism.
Hinduism,
Here you have the Buddhists on the screen.
starting to connect with all religions, which is very interesting because according to Revelation chapter 13, it says all the world wonders after the beast.
Yeah, and he made incredible headway in doing this. And he was in Egypt, Libya, United Arab Emirates, Israel, went to the trying to reconcile with Jewish leaders. And then in 2015, America was largely people fleeing religious persecution, and there's a lot of animosity between Protestants and Catholics, and some Protestants were very cruel, actually, to the Catholics that came across the ocean. But when you saw those images of the Vatican flag and the U.S. flag flying in front of the great obelisk of the Washington Monument, of course, there's a big obelisk in front of the Vatican, too. You and I were there, 2 years ago or a year ago, I forget. Yeah. Time passes. And then he went from there, he went and he addressed a joint session of Congress, first time any pope has done that. Went to the United Nations. He went to New York, held a mass in 3 places where our government was started. Philadelphia, our first capital was New York. He went to New York City, Washington, D.C., held a mass in all those places. Record crowds, standing ovations, and it just reminds us of, and all the world wondered. And I think there's even some, just the video footage that you see of those meetings where just the throngs of people were following the Pope. And even though he had to negotiate a lot of problems, there were a number of sex scandals that hit the headlines, they never really turned against Francis during that time. They felt like he was still a good Pope, a little more welcoming of the gays in the Catholic Church, and conservative Catholics were concerned that he was being a little too open and changing too many traditions. But so we've got a new chapter, and people are wondering what is coming next. Not only did he meet with the Lutherans, meaning you've got the Lutherans in Europe, but evangelicals. And I think many remember we did a video about this years ago that kind of went viral, when Tony Palmer was at Kenneth Copeland's church saying the protest is over. And then here's a picture where they were invited to the Vatican, and you've got Kenneth Copeland. Tony Palmer died tragically in a motorcycle accident after that. And James Roberson and his wife and other evangelical leaders. Here he is with Rick Warren, and he's met with Joel Osteen, and the list goes on. But he was the great wound healer. He was trying to heal the rift between the Protestants, Catholics, and forge unity with other world religions. And through all of this, when people said we need a spiritual head in the world, folks looked to the papacy for that person that would be the most likely spiritual head.
It's interesting, Pastor, you look back, Pastor Doug, at the different popes and their positions. Pope John Paul was really the one that sort of elevated. Pope John Paul II really elevated the position of the Pope, reaching out not only to Catholics, but Protestant countries in particular. And people thought, wow, he was very popular. I mean, heads of state were all present at his funeral. And yet Pope Francis has grown even greater in popularity in non-Catholic countries. I understand that there is going to be more than 50 heads of state present at the funeral tomorrow in Rome. And these are big countries. These are influential powers. Everyone's going to be there, all assembled.
That speaks volumes by itself.
Just their presence, absolutely.
Yeah. And, of course, Revelation 13 talks about the first beast. And this was, during the Dark Ages especially, the Catholic Church was a persecuting power. And they admit that. The year of Jubilee, John Paul II said, we're apologizing for what some of the church did. But millions were tortured. They had the Inquisition. You and I have seen the torture chambers under the churches, and you can take tours. So there was a lot of persecution. But then it says there's a second lamb-like beast that is going to rise up in Revelation 13 that is going to be instrumental in reaching its hand across the abyss to join the hand of Catholicism, and then united with spiritualism, this threefold union, the beast, the dragon, the false prophet, are going to end up compelling people to worship a certain way. Now, I'm just going to pause here for a moment, and well, I'll tell you what, one more thing that was rather amazing, I'll show the slide, then we'll move on, is the day before the Pope died. Vice President J.D. Vance, who is a convert to Catholicism through Jesuit influence, he went to the Vatican on his way to India, where I think he may be right. Now he's probably heading back to Rome now, but one of the last official visits the Pope made, and J.D. Vance said later, he said, I'm so honored that I got to shake his hand, and one of the last official visitors that he spoke with, and tell him that I'm praying for him every day. And then J.D. Vance said, and I'm still praying for him, even after he died, which is kind of interesting. And but here's the quote that you'll find in the book, Testimonies for the Church, Volume 1, 451. It's also in great controversy. When Protestantism shall stretch her hand across the gulf to grasp the hand of the Roman power, when she shall reach over the abyss to clasp the hands with spiritualism, when under the influence of this threefold union, our country will repudiate every principle of its constitution as a Protestant and Republican government, and shall make provision for the propagation of papal falsehoods and delusions, then we may know that the time has come for the marvelous working of Satan, that the end is near. One last thought. When you and I were at the Vatican, you didn't know I was going to put this up, but you remember we saw the pictures of the popes are all along the wall, every pope. But I don't know that people realize that because of the architecture, there's only one slot left, unless they redesign the whole chapel. And so you had Francis, and we even were there. We looked at this, and you can see the picture, and we said, they've only got room for one more pope. I wonder if there's any prophetic significance to that, or they're going to have to find a new way to display future popes. But
that was actually that was St. Paul's Cathedral in Rome. That was also the place, that's the same cathedral, where you showed the picture a little earlier, where the Pope's sitting flanked on either side by these two golden angels.
Yeah.
That's where that throne is.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, we walked by there, and I pointed to it. I said, Pastor, look at that. And of course, we took a picture of it. The Pope is the only one that's allowed. It's all cordoned off. He's the only one that's allowed to be seated on that throne there in St.
Because they know what
Paul's
that represents.
Cathedral. Yep. Very interesting. Yeah.
So a lot of people now are concerned. They say, well, what's happening? What's yet to happen? You're going to see eventually religious laws. Revelation says people will be compelled to worship. And America will be involved in that. Now, right now, we believe in freedom of religion. But a lot of countries are going through a pendulum swing from hyper-liberalism, and they're swinging back towards a more conservative government, not just in America, but you can look in Argentina, El Salvador, and so many countries around the world, or France. They're getting really fed up with the government basically protecting very bad behavior in the name of liberalism. Now, I think that most Christians that are watching would think, well, I wish that the country would embrace Christian ideals. I mean, if you're a Christian, you would want people to embrace Christian ideals. The danger is that the government would go beyond the last 6 commandments that say, don't kill, don't steal, no perjury. Parents should have first authority over their children, and the covetousness, all the litigation going on. We wish that there was more of that. We wish that the 10 Commandments in principle were taught in history, because the country was established where, we gave out Bibles in public schools, and culturally, you've got to be careful about saying it was a Christian nation, because we did protect the freedom of religion for others. But Roger Williams realized that the government cannot make laws regarding the first 4 commandments. We can't be telling people what God to worship. We can't be telling them what his name is, or how to worship him, or when to worship him. And this is the first 4 commandments. And the pendulum typically swings too far. So there's a delicate balance. I think Christians should be thrilled when the nation wants to return to moral values. I mean, if you've got a lot of murder and theft and you say, all right, we're going to teach the commandments about don't kill and respect property and even marriage, we should be thrilled with that. Those are principles, I think, that are civil in nature. But when they go beyond that and start telling you who the God is and how to worship him, then it's going to be dicey. And we're at the place now where I believe, we don't know who the next pope is going to be, and I've got some slides where people are speculating they've actually got a betting gambit going and sites where you can bet who the next pope is going to be, and they've got their top candidates. So we don't know who that's going to be right now. In the next 10 days or 12 days, they're going to have that conclave, and probably within 15 days or 2 weeks, we will know. The smoke, I forget if it's a white or black smoke, comes out when they find the...
White is they found a pope.
They find a
black,
pope.
They've got to keep looking.
Yeah, they got to have another ballot.
Right.
They need 2/3. And so there's some names. We don't know who that will be. But at any time, there could be some kind of a national calamity, international crisis. Could be a war, could be a natural disaster, could be an economic meltdown, could be a combination of the three, another pandemic. We don't know, but there could be a pivotal triggering event. People turn to religion when they're afraid. Mm-hmm. And then if you get a leader that stands up in the government, and we have only our second Catholic vice president now. I don't know if you know that. The first one was Biden. Vance is the only second Catholic vice president. And he'll probably, Trump's term is going to be over in 3 years, roughly, 3.5 years. He probably, if things continue, will run at some point. And there could be a crisis and people could start compelling worship out of fear and making religious laws. It probably is not going to happen overnight, but the final movements will be rapid ones. And so people need to be aware what prophecy says about this.
All right, that's the first part of the video, and you see what I was trying to talk about. He's done an excellent job pretty much going through the drastic change that we've seen with Pope Francis. As a Jesuit, I tell you what, the Protestant world will never be the same because of what Pope Francis has managed to do as far as bringing the daughters back to Rome. He's the man of the Second Vatican Council, says Arturo Sosa, the father of the Jesuits, and we've spoken about that in this channel before. Now, the next thing I'm going to address here is what he says about Project 2025, right? So we're going to hear what Doug Bachelor says. We're going to fast forward to about 44 minutes in this one. So I want you to hear what he says, and I want you to think about it and tell me, do you agree or disagree?
Pastor Doug, do you believe that Project 2025 will bring in Sunday's law?
The language I read in Project 2025, you maybe have heard the expression a nothing burger. I read it over and over again. I know people made a lot out of that. But if everything, first of all, the president doesn't have to follow anything that the Heritage Foundation is a think tank. He doesn't have to follow anything that they come up with. They're suggestions. Democrats have got the Council on American Progress. They've got their think tank. Republicans have their think tank. They come up with platform ideas. And there was something in there about protecting the time to worship on Sunday, or it says for some this would be Saturday. It was really protections for workers so that you either get extra time, extra payment. I didn't see that as a law compelling anybody to worship on that day. So if they're going by that, I didn't see the Sunday law that is compelling you to worship on that day in that language. I just have to be honest.
Okay.
But
Okay, so I will say I do agree with what he said here in the light of that we do make too much of this. I will agree. I had to even tone it down to a degree, although I'm paying attention to what's going on there. But I try not to make too much of this Project 2025, the labor law, the Sunday law, page 589 that's in there. So that's one element of that. And it is true what he says. It is a proposal is to protect the Labor Act in the hope that they can get these workers off on Sundays and also Sabbath keepers. There's a clause for Sabbath keepers as well, so that would include Jews and Seventh-day Adventists. So that's there. However, the thing with Project 25, what it does, let me use this analogy. it opens the door for more upcoming Sunday laws. It's like a foot in the door in a sense. It's like an entering wedge. That tends to be the way it always began, right? Every avalanche starts with a snowflake, right? So that's the element of that. It can become something worse than what it is now, but you cannot say it is a national Sunday law. We should make a big deal about it, as oftentimes I hear it being preached, and I'm careful making a big deal about it. In all my videos, when I've spoken about this, I look at the Project 25 track and I see what these men are saying and how they are pushing it. It is not a national Sunday law, but it is an entering wedge. The Project 2025 Sunday Law Labor Act, think of it as gasoline, right? Gasoline can exist, but without somebody light up the fire, we don't have an explosion. So it's gonna take fire. It's gonna take a storm. It's gonna take crisis to take this and spin it around. And again, you have to keep in mind, a lot of these political laws can also be modified depending on circumstances. That tends to happen later on. And this is why we must be on our guard. We must be paying attention to these matters, but at the same time, we must not be hysterical. We must not be hysterical to the point where we're driving people crazy with making presumptions about things that don't happen. You remember the people that used to say, the Pope is the last Pope. It's like they fade in the background. You don't hear these people anymore. They're still preaching, but, they used to say that, but they fade. So sensualism that we oftentimes make of Bible prophecies, it's not safe because you lose more credibility when certain things don't happen. What you have to do is follow the signs of the times. As you see things are happening, we report on them, and we show what's happening there. But we try not to make any final declaration because there's a lot happening that we may not understand now. It is as there's the unrolling of the scroll happens, many things that we are seeing will later on make a lot more sense as the signs are falling in place. So there are certain events that are yet to take place in both nature, in political circles, in society as well, that will play a significant role for this. So if Project 2025 Sunday Law Labor Act was gasoline, it's lacking fire, right? It's lacking the match. Something has to happen to light it up. And we haven't seen that yet, and this is why we kind of have to be careful how we speak about this. So Doug Bachelor is correct, but I will not call it a nothing burger. it is still something. It can become something worse, but it's still something that Bible prophecy students should keep their eye on. Anyway, that's my thought and perspective on that. Share your thought and perspective with me. Where do you stand when it comes to this matter? Do you agree with Doug? Do you disagree with Doug? It doesn't matter. Let's not make a war about Doug Bachelor here. This is my guy. This is my man. I love his study guides. I went through all his study guides when I became a Seventh-day Adventist, and I'm studying with my son right now. We're studying Doug Bachelor's study guides. This is a good man, a God-fearing man. I remember when the church was pushing Sister Barbara O'Neill away, saying she cannot be recommended. Doug Bachelor welcomed her and embraced her and gave her a platform. When Professor Walter Veith has been, cast aside, he was welcome at Amazing Facts as well. So Doug Bachelor has a good way of, taking a stand for what is true without saying too much. So I like that about him as well. So a very God-fearing man. But I'll tell you what, I want to hear your thoughts. Where do you stand when it comes to his presentation, and how do you feel about the remark that he just made about Project 2025? Are we making too much of this thing, or are we not seeing the light? Do you see it as I see it, as an entering wedge, something that could become worse later on? Or maybe we are just wasting our time talking about nothing, right? Could it be true? Let's have the conversation in the comment below. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Until next time, have a good one. Bye.